Hi, I'm Georgia Raisman. I'm here this morning with Rita Higgins, a member of the Select Board. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk about things related to everyday life on Nantucket. And I had in mind a few things, Rita, since you've had all of, 18 months experience now on the Select Board.
Exactly.
Which is really a baptism by fire, an extended fire. I guess first on my mind is this stuff relating to Surfside Crossing and the sewer and water issues. Do you think that they're being properly addressed, or how do you think, I know you're the Select Board, not the Zoning Board of Appeals, how do you think that they are they being well enough addressed, and do you think there's any more, another role that either your board or another entity could play in making sure that the sewers are properly constructed, whatever the plan turns out to be?
Yeah, my sense at this stage is that at the moment it's outside of the Select Board's really our control, and the reports that we have asked for, in addition to the ones that were already required, are meant to really get into the detail more about some of the environmental issues, the water issues, and the sewer issues. So I think at this stage, we are doing what we can, and it's really a matter of understanding. Now we're collecting the reports and they're coming back, so understanding what they are saying. I think for me, what it's really brought up is that I think all of these questions we should be applying at a much broader scale on the island. It's not just Surfside Crossing that we should be this focused on sewer and water. One of the things that I worry about the most, it seems as if the sewer is going to be able to be managed through, if there was no change to the Surfside Crossing. They do have a second proposal in, but there hasn't been much discussion about it, and that proposal does decrease the density, so it would decrease the impact on any sewer. The sewer, it seems they will be able to manage in a way that would be considered satisfactory by the state. But I always think about density, impervious surfaces, stormwater runoff, groundwater, the impact of taking 12 acres of vegetation and turning it into hard surfaces and lawn, and the impact on nearby neighborhoods as well as the pond. And those are things that get addressed in a stormwater management plan, but I think in many ways, we're really sort of, towns and municipalities are starting to realize how important stormwater management is, and that we really have to start to do a little bit better with the systems that we have. So that's one where I'm not entirely convinced that we have the best system designed yet.
I don't remember whether you were here in 1995 when there was that proposal to build a huge market on Old South Road, and the slogan that was used was "Bag the Market." And the reason that market did not get built was stormwater runoff from an impervious surface, and it was thought, and the argument that was made, and I remember that being a definitive argument that was made, was that the stormwater runoff might affect the sole source aquifer. And I'm listening to this argument now and thinking, why is nobody making that argument the same way? Because that was enough to bag that market back then. That was like 23 years ago. So backing up a little bit, tell me about your background and how you got to Nantucket. You were not born here. You were...
No, I wasn't born here, but I had a family out here in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So we would have come out to visit. When I was very young, we came out to visit, and then that family moved off. And so we would have come out occasionally throughout.
So you've been visiting all your life.
Yeah, visiting all my life, and then came back sort of my own volition as an adult in 2003.
And you went to college off island? Well, obviously
Yes.
off island, but you went to college?
I went to university at McGill up in Montreal. And after studying there, that was when I really started to come here, was when I needed summer work. And I loved the ocean and loved the opportunity to work outdoors. I was studying environmental science and international development, but I was very much interested in forestry. So I loved I'd worked for a bit in forestry, and I loved being outside. So I ended up on Nantucket, sort of got thrown into landscaping here, which turned into a landscape design business of my own, and green roofing. So I don't do green roofing here, but I did green roofing when I lived in Ireland for 6 years. So I was here, I moved to Ireland for 6 years, and came back.
Oh my goodness, do you have family in Ireland as well?
Family I've married into.
Oh,
So.
Oh, well, so now you're both back here.
We are. I met my husband here. He's Irish, and we moved to Ireland, we set up a landscape design and green roofing business there, and then really just had difficulties with the economy being what it was and being in construction ultimately. So Nantucket was a home for both of us, so we moved back here.
Oh, good. And then you got involved in politics, I think, just because you felt there needed to be another voice for younger voices on island.
Yes, absolutely. And it strikes me every day how important it is to have such diversity of perspective on the board, as well as every single meeting, how important it is for citizens to come and tell us the history that I don't know, or the neighborhood that I don't live in every single day and see the impacts of rainwater or traffic. So there really is this essential interplay between citizens and the select board, and then within the select board, having that diversity is very, very important. So I'm glad, it was one of the reasons that I ran, because I felt it was important, and the more that I'm involved, that's solidified. It is very important.
Because I have been participating in something called the Citizens Police Academy. I don't know if you know about it, but I love that experience. I really do, because it's been such an interesting insight into how the issues the police deal with on a regular basis, which are not all that different from off-island police departments, interestingly enough, just smaller. But one of the major issues they deal with is not going to be unfamiliar to you. It's housing, and one of we know the intractable housing issues, and that's what Surfside Crossing is theoretically trying to address. But the issue that they keep coming up against, and I'm sure it's true with firemen too, is that they have young policemen who come here, they train them, and then they stay here 2.5 years, and they move off. And they're all nicely well trained, and they're really great, capable of being really good members of the community, and off they go, because they can't afford to keep living here, and their friends are all off island, and now there is no community in that 20 to 35-year-old group that they can identify with who live here.
Exactly.
And I just think there's got to be some way for the select board to kind of help think out of the box here and find some ability for the town to either build, underwrite, write bonds for, create an opportunity for housing to be built, if it's on town land, if it's on fairgrounds, for the town civil servants, for policemen and firemen. One of the points they make regularly, is that policemen like to live with policemen. It's not because they're clannish, it's because when they come home at 4 o'clock from a schedule that's got them working, they need to go to sleep. And they can't, if they're living in a neighborhood where somebody's going to have a Super Bowl party, or someone's kids are coming home and playing outside, they're not going to understand that schedule. And they feel more comfortable living where if somebody says, I got to sleep at 4 o'clock, that's okay.
Exactly.
So I just really wish that there was some way that you guys could think of, and I know you and Jason are really good thinkers about these things, how we can keep these people.
Well, I think that is actually something that is going to be discussed quite a bit coming up to the next town meeting. Almost everything you've mentioned, the making sure we have housing for town employees, civil servants, is the second of 3 goals under housing that the select board has as part of the strategic plan. So we are very much focused on that sort of sector of people who need housing, and specifically for the town, because that really is a problem across the board in attracting the people that we would like to attract in terms of skills, and then very much so, like you said, with the police specifically, making sure that there's long-term options for them, whereas right now there's really not. And then as well, I'm on the Affordable Housing Trust, and we are just wrapping up our strategic plan, and there is going to be, we're hoping to have about 5 or 6 different sort of tools in the toolbox that will help us really take a crack at exactly the kind of issues that you're talking about. And it is intended to allow for outside the box thinking, as well as the select board strategic plan. We sort of have these sort of looking down from above large visionary goals, which the department heads, as well as a couple other stakeholders that would have the knowledge and the experience, are then putting the details on how we actually achieve that. But one of the things that came up in my environmental work group, because we're looking at the environmental leadership, is to let the department heads know this is the opportunity to be creative, to think outside the box, not just think about what the state requires, but particularly when we want to show leadership, going above and beyond what's required, and that this select board really wants to see that. And we may have to hone it back down, but those sort of ideas that right now might seem totally outside the box in 2 or 3 years might be the next
Acceptable.
step. So if we have them sort of written and sort of there on the periphery, we might be able to grab them and take them up again sometime soon. But I do think over the next, 4 or 5 months until April town meeting, there's going to be a lot of discussion about how we really make an impact on affordable housing and specifically for town employees.
It's interesting. Somebody said to me, a complete stranger to New York, to Nantucket, said to me, "Why doesn't the town just offer? Build housing for police and firemen, and then offer them free housing? Just free housing. Just say, this is your housing. You can save your salary, because what an inducement, right? To stay here, not pay rent. So whatever they would have been allocating for rent, they can put towards a down payment on a house, even if it's a covenant house, if it's a safe harbor house of some sort. I mean, what an inducement to keeping people here that would be.
That would be
So that's
that would be
that's a way
fantastic.
out of the box idea, right? So why don't we put that out there, and maybe in 5 years that would seem like not an unreasonable thought. I mean, from a town perspective,
Yeah.
you just build that into the cost of the salary, right?
Well, and that's the only, so that is something that has been discussed, and one of the problems that comes up fairly frequently when the town has offered, we've thought about even housing for 3 months so that people, as they come to Nantucket, transition in and then find their own. That's part of something that we're already doing. But part of the problem is union negotiations, and then how you essentially craft something where someone is getting something free.
And you compensate older members, senior members in a different way. But
It's
that's
tricky.
That's mechanical. I mean, not mechanical, but that's something that you can think about and compensate for.
Yes.
Financially, I mean, pension distribution increases and something. That's, you just think about it.
It would have to be broad, and it definitely is something that is being thought about, particularly again with department heads. And another one we're looking at as well is the getting the right mix of rental and ownership, and that makes a big difference too when you're looking at what that sergeants would want versus
Right.
the officers.
Right. Right.
So
Patrolman.
those are all things that are in the mix, and again, particularly with Affordable Housing Trust, having a strategic plan, hoping that some leadership, someone to really synthesize all of these ideas that have been mentioned and are floating around, to look at them, see which ones are going to be the most productive in the short term and then also in the long term.
Right.
And, again, providing incentive for people to come and to
And
stay
Yeah,
is
and stay
really...
and have families and stay. Yeah,
One of the things that I notice, and I think it's interesting when you say that community for sort of the 25 to 35, is one of the things I notice amongst my own friends and colleagues is that when you are in a situation where you're renting and you might have 3 or 4 other housemates, or you might have certain rules with landlords, it's actually very difficult sometimes to create community. That's one of the things that I'm seeing being a little bit eroded by the state of housing on Nantucket, where people don't have spaces where, particularly in the winter, in the summer you can all go to the beach, but there's not a space to go. You can't go over to someone's house because they're living with 4 other people,
Right.
or the landlord,
doesn't like parties
doesn't
or
like,
something, yeah.
and it doesn't even have to be a party, but they don't want 4 cars there. So
Right.
there's all these nuances to that sort of generation who's looking for a place to not just live today and tomorrow, but really look at this long term.
Yeah, I think it's a problem, but it has. I would think it'd be an opportunity too. I mean, for really some interesting thinking and interesting development too, in terms
Yes.
of cluster housing, in terms of cluster duplex housing. I mean, I would think planners and people and architects might be people who would love to get into that.
That's something that so coming from the background that I do in landscape design, I see design competitions fairly regularly, and they can be tricky, and
That would be a fun
they
idea.
can be
wouldn't it?
tricky.
Wow.
But I do think that the beauty of design competitions crafted well is that, say you have 30 applicants, you now have 30 people
Smart
thinking
people
outside
thinking,
the box,
yeah,
thinking
yeah,
about your specific issue, and whether that results in sort of something at a neighborhood scale or a certain streetscape or a
Right.
dormitory style.
Right.
Most of the competitions that I know of, they're most valuable when they're a multidisciplinary team. So you'd have an architect, landscape architect, planner, urban planner.
Right.
And for me, one of the things that I would love to see is Nantucket reach out to sort of graduate level university students, because those are the people that we're trying to house.
Right.
That's one of the, we've got families, we sort of know 2 and 3 bedrooms, family homes, we can do that. But I really believe that the generation coming in behind me, I'm sort of on the cusp of the 2 different, sort of the 25 to 35 and 35 and above, but I just think the demands and the desires of the types of houses that we live in are very different from 10 years above me or my parents' generation. So I think getting that information and then using that and being creative, I would hate to see us build
Just
for
what you've always
the
built.
last generation with the new ones coming in
I
with
like
different
the idea of a
demands.
design competition. So what you need is a philanthropist to underwrite the award.
And I
Or
think
even if it's somebody like Romaine, but a philanthropist to underwrite the reward.
That would be
somebody
ideal.
to be inspired to put up $50,000 and get a design competition out
design
there.
competition and
Figure out where you would like this place to be built and what the strictures might be.
Exactly. So there really are those 2 elements of it. It's the actual, we'll say, the award, and then there's also
You need to plan for the
running
design
it,
competition.
the scope of
yeah.
work. What
Mhm.
exactly are we
Right.
asking for?
Right. You need to do that work before you put out the design
Exactly.
competition. But boy, would
Yeah.
that be fun to do.
Yeah, I think it would be fantastic. It is something, again, we have so many different things going on. That's one of the things I've been thinking about quite a bit for the past couple months. And again, it's just one to try and sort of keep tipping away at, but with affordable housing, the time is really now.
Yeah.
So trying to see how it could possibly fit into how we approach, and what I approach housing, but also really take leadership. Not just sort of throw up a couple dormitories because we need them right now,
Yeah.
but really think about how people are going to be living in these homes and these neighborhoods.
So there are people who say that maybe we shouldn't even worry about this, that maybe we should just let Nantucket be not affordable, because after all, then we would have fewer people here and things, we would have less growth, and that would be okay. And that maybe by making affordable housing affordable, we're attracting people who we don't want to attract. They shouldn't even come here. What would you say to that?
Well, I think there's many different layers to that question and to what people think about when they think about affordable housing. Way back at the start, I thought maybe we could change it to being called community housing. To me, what is most important in this conversation, because we're not Manhattan, we're not Boston, cities all over the world, the Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. Affordable housing isn't just a Nantucket issue, but what does set us apart is the 30 miles of ocean between where people would be commuting from. And one of the reasons I wanted to change it to community housing is because I think people are losing a little bit of the sense of what it really means for people to lose the community, to not be able to live here, the professionals, the younger generations. And it's not just people who, like myself, wash ashores. It's 14 generations of Nantucketers who can't afford, they're living with their parents. They're in their 30s, they're living with their parents, and they can't afford anything unless their parents sell their house. Even at that, if their parents sold their house, they'd be gone. So it's not just wash ashores, it's not just new people. And when we build more, it doesn't mean more people are going to come necessarily. There is a need here, and the idea of community housing is that I really believe in a socially, economically diverse community. And I think, to me, that is the essence of community. And if we don't have that, because you have to be earning over $200,000 a year as a family unit to afford to live here, then we really become very homogenous. And Nantucket has never been that homogenous. It's always been a very diverse place. So I think, again, it's something that there are going to be people that will never believe in it because they do see it as free and they see it as a handout. And I think that the market should just be the market, and it should, if everything crashes and people move away, it will all settle itself out. But I think that loss of community is one of the things outside. It's the sort of external consequences of this sort of market system. And so personally, I really believe in a diverse community, and I think by addressing affordable housing, we are maintaining that on Nantucket, or we're making an attempt to.
We're keeping Nantucket the way it has always been, in other words.
Yes, I think so. It has always struck me how diverse, going to the Whaling Museum and looking at all the people that arrived on Nantucket and now are part of those 12, 13, 14 generation families. It has been an incredibly diverse island. And I just think we have so much to lose if people really can't stay here. And I think the other thing is people don't realize I qualify. I need affordable housing based on the salary that I have in order to stay here. I think about it every winter. Because my work is so seasonal, I need affordable housing. I qualify for affordable housing. And I'm the kind of person that will be leaving, will have to leave if we just give up and say, let the market do its thing. So,
Well, I think even I would say that would have to be a loss. And I say even I because even I are on different sides of other issues. But I think it's so important that we keep all these ideas flowing and that we keep people of all these generations involved and not just assume that it can always be the way it always was. I had an earlier interview in which people said, it's always the case that older people think back on how it always was and we should try to get back to that. And, things don't happen that way.
Yeah.
We move on and we try to just adjust as well as we can. And what I think is exciting is having you, having Jason, having and still having Matt Fee and having people think about this and in such an intelligent way and coming up with some great ideas for what the facts are on the ground, the facts that we're dealing with every day now.
yeah.
So I appreciate you putting all that work and effort into it on a daily basis, and I know it's a daily basis, and I think we can really make it work out
Thank you.
in an exciting way. Thank you for coming in, Rita.
Absolutely. Thank you, Georgia.